Karoline Leavitt terminates Jasmine Crockett's career in one sentence. Part 1. The morning sun peeked through the blinds of Karoline Leavitt's office in Washington, D.C. She had been at her desk since 5 a.m., earlier than most people in the capital city. At 32 years old, Karoline had already made a name for herself as one of the sharpest press secretaries in politics. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore a navy blue suit that gave her an air of authority, despite her youth. Karoline sipped her third cup of coffee as she scrolled through news articles on her tablet. Her blue eyes narrowed when she came across yet another headline about Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. For the past year, Crockett had been rising in popularity, making bold claims about economic reform that Karoline knew were built on shaky facts. Another day, another chance to set the record straight, Karoline muttered to herself as she made notes on Crockett's latest statements. The office door opened, and Lisa Morgan walked in carrying a stack of folders. Lisa had been Karoline's research assistant for 3 years. They made a good team, Karoline with her quick thinking and sharp tongue, Lisa with her attention to detail and endless patience. "I brought everything I could find on Crockett's voting record," Lisa said, placing the folders on Karoline's desk. "And you won't believe what I discovered about her district funding claims." Karoline looked up, interested. "Tell me." Lisa pulled out a paper from one of the folders. She's been saying her district program created 5,000 new jobs last year, but according to these official numbers, they only created 700 jobs, and the program cost taxpayers 3 times what was budgeted. A small smile formed on Karoline's lips. "That's exactly the kind of thing we need. Good work, Lisa." The phone on Karoline's desk rang. She picked it up, listened for a moment, then said, "I'll be right there." Turning to Lisa, she explained, "The boss wants to see me. Keep digging into those numbers." Karoline walked through the long hallways of the building, nodding to people she knew. Everyone respected her, even if some feared her sharp mind. She had a talent for finding the weak spot in any argument and exposing it with just a few well-chosen words. She knocked on the door of her boss, Senator Greg Powell, and entered when he called out. Senator Powell was a tall man with gray hair and 40 years of political experience. He trusted Karoline to handle his toughest media challenges. "You wanted to see me, Senator?" Karoline asked. "Yes, sit down," Powell said, gesturing to a chair. "I've been watching Congresswoman Crockett's rise in the polls. She's getting a lot of positive press for her economic plan." Karoline nodded. "I've been tracking her statements. There are holes in her logic big enough to drive a truck through." "That's why I called you in," Powell said, leaning forward. "The Joint Economic Committee hearing is next week. Crockett will be there pushing her plan. I want you to prepare a response that cuts through her talking points." "I'm already working on it," Karoline assured him. Lisa found some interesting discrepancies between what Crockett claims her district program accomplished and the actual results. Powell smiled. "That's why you're the best at what you do, Karoline. You find the facts others miss." After the meeting, Karoline returned to her office and called her friend Steve Baker, who worked as a journalist for the Washington Post. "Steve, it's Karoline. Can you meet for lunch today?" 2 hours later, they sat at a quiet table in a small restaurant 3 blocks from the Capitol. The place was known for its privacy, the tables were far apart, and the noise level was kept low. "Thanks for meeting me," Karoline said, stirring her iced tea. "What's the word on Crockett? Is she as popular as the media makes her seem?" Steve shrugged. "She's got charm, I'll give her that. People like her because she seems authentic. But between you and me, some of my colleagues are starting to ask questions about her numbers." "What kind of questions?" Karoline asked, trying to sound casual. "Well, her job creation claims seem high, and that program she implemented in her district last year. I heard it went way over budget." Karoline nodded slowly. "Interesting, I heard something similar." "Are you planning something, Karoline?" Steve asked with a knowing smile. "You've got that look in your eyes." "Just doing my job," she replied, "making sure the public gets all the facts." After lunch, Karoline made her way to the Library of Congress. She preferred doing research there sometimes, away from the distractions of her office. She spent 3 hours going through economic reports and public records related to Crockett's district. By the time she left, Karoline had filled a notebook with facts and figures that told a very different story than the one Congresswoman Crockett had been telling the public. That evening, Karoline met with Frank Cooper, one of Senator Powell's senior advisors, at a coffee shop near her apartment. Frank was in his 50s with reading glasses perched permanently on his nose and decades of political wisdom to share. "The hearing next week is going to be big," Frank said, keeping his voice low despite the noisy coffee shop. "All the major networks will cover it. If Crockett performs well, her economic plan could gain serious support." "She won't perform well," Karoline said confidently. "Not once I'm done preparing our response." Frank looked concerned. "Don't underestimate her, Karoline. She's survived tough questioning before. She's quick on her feet." "But she's never faced someone with the facts I now have," Karoline replied. "Her entire economic plan is based on a district program that failed spectacularly. She's been hiding the real numbers, but I found them." "Are you sure? Those kinds of records can be hard to access." Karoline smiled. "I have my methods." The next day, Karoline and Lisa spent hours in a conference room, spreading documents across a large table and building their case against Crockett's claims. They were joined by Dan Miller, an economist who worked as a consultant for the senator. "These job numbers don't add up," Dan said, looking at Crockett's public statements. "She's counting temporary positions as permanent jobs." "And look at this," Lisa added, pointing to a budget document. "Her district program was supposed to cost $12 million, but the final bill was $35 million. That's almost 3 times the original budget." Karoline nodded, taking notes. "What about the small business growth she keeps talking about?" Dan shook his head. "According to these tax records, more small businesses closed than opened in her district last year. It's the opposite of what she's claiming." For the next several days, Karoline barely left her office. She ate meals at her desk and sometimes slept on the small couch in the corner. She was building a case, piece by piece, fact by fact. It wasn't just about politics for her. It was about truth. She couldn't stand when politicians used false numbers to push their agendas. By Sunday night, Karoline had what she needed. She had written a single sentence that summed up everything wrong with Crockett's economic plan. It was a question, really, but one that Crockett wouldn't be able to answer without admitting her failure. On Monday morning, Karoline stood in front of Senator Powell's desk, sharing her findings and her plan. "This is good, Karoline," Powell said, impressed. "Very good. But timing will be everything. When do you plan to use this information?" "I've been thinking about that," Karoline replied. "Crockett is holding a press conference tomorrow about her economic plan. She'll be taking questions. I've arranged for a friendly reporter to call on me." Powell nodded slowly. "1 sentence, you said?" "1 sentence," Karoline confirmed. "That's all it will take. The facts speak for themselves." As she left the senator's office, Karoline felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Tomorrow would be a turning point in her career, and the end of Jasmine Crockett's. All it would take was one well-researched, perfectly delivered sentence to bring down the house of cards Crockett had built. Karoline smiled to herself. In Washington, knowledge was power, and tomorrow, everyone would know just how powerful the right facts could be. Karoline Leavitt Terminates Jasmine Crockett's career in 1 sentence. Part 2. The morning of the press conference arrived with heavy rain pounding against the windows of Karoline's apartment. She took it as a good sign. Storms often came before major changes. She dressed carefully in a red blazer and black skirt, a powerful combination that made her stand out in a crowd. Today was not a day to blend in. Karoline checked her phone and saw 3 missed calls from Lisa. She called back immediately. "Did you see the news?" Lisa asked without saying hello. "Crockett just announced she's bringing the district program director to the press conference, a man named Paul Wilson." Karoline frowned. This was unexpected. "Do we have anything on him?" "I'm looking now," Lisa said. "But here's the interesting part. He wasn't the original program director. He only took over 4 months ago, after the program was already failing." A smile spread across Karoline's face. So he's a fixer. They brought him in to clean up the mess. That actually helps our case, Lisa. It proves they knew there was a problem. I'll keep digging. See you at the office in 30 minutes? Make it 20, Karoline said, grabbing her keys. The office was buzzing with activity when Karoline arrived. News of Crockett's press conference had everyone on edge. Senator Powell was meeting with his top advisors, and Karoline was invited to join them. We need to be careful here, said Mike Davis, the senator's chief of staff. Crockett has friends in the media. If we attack her too directly, they might spin it against us. Karoline shook her head. With all due respect, Mike, we don't need to attack her. We just need to ask one question and let her own record do the damage. What question? Powell asked, looking interested. Karoline opened her notebook and read the sentence she had crafted. The room fell silent as her words sank in. That's perfect, Powell said finally. Simple, direct, and impossible to dodge without looking bad. But who's going to ask it? Mike wondered. We can't have it come directly from our office. I've arranged for Sam Peterson from the Daily News to call on me during the question period, Karoline explained. He owes me a favor, and he's always fair in his reporting. Powell nodded his approval. Just remember, Karoline, timing is everything. Wait for the right moment. At 11:30, Karoline left the office and walked 3 blocks to the Mayflower Hotel, where Crockett's press conference was scheduled for noon. The rain had stopped, but dark clouds still hung over the city. The hotel's conference room was already crowded with reporters and cameras when she arrived. Karoline spotted Sam Peterson near the front and caught his eye. He gave her a slight nod to confirm their arrangement. She then moved to a position along the right wall, where she would be visible but not too obvious. At exactly noon, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett entered the room with her team. Crockett was 45, with a confident smile and a stylish gray suit. Beside her walked a nervous-looking man whom Karoline guessed was Paul Wilson, the new program director. Thank you all for coming today, Crockett began, standing at the podium with practiced ease. I'm excited to share more details about our economic plan, which is based on the successful model we implemented in my district last year. Karoline listened carefully as Crockett talked about job creation, small business growth, and budget efficiency, all claims that Karoline knew were false. She felt her phone vibrate in her pocket and discreetly checked it. It was a text from Lisa. Wilson was hired after the program went $20 million over budget. He has no economics background. Previous job was PR crisis management. This was even better than Karoline had hoped. She texted back a quick thanks and returned her attention to Crockett, who was now introducing Wilson. And now I'd like to introduce Paul Wilson, who has been instrumental in the success of our district program, Crockett said, gesturing to the man beside her. Wilson stepped forward and spoke briefly about innovative approaches and community-centered solutions, vague terms that said nothing concrete about actual results. After 15 minutes of presentations, Crockett opened the floor for questions. Several reporters asked easy questions about the timeline for the national rollout of her plan and how it would affect different regions. Karoline waited patiently. The key was not to strike too early. Let Crockett get comfortable first. Let her think she was sailing through this press conference without challenges. Finally, after about 10 questions, Sam Peterson raised his hand and was called on. Congresswoman, we've heard a lot about the success of your district program today, Sam said. I'd like to call on Karoline Leavitt, who I believe has a question about the specific metrics of that success. All heads turned toward Karoline. Crockett's smile faltered slightly but remained in place. She clearly hadn't expected to see Senator Powell's press secretary at her event. Of course, Crockett said, her voice steady. Ms. Leavitt, what's your question? Karoline stepped forward slightly, her posture confident but not aggressive. The room fell silent. Camera lenses turned toward her. This was the moment she had prepared for. Thank you, Congresswoman, Karoline said clearly. If your district program worked as successfully as you claim, why did it require an emergency? Budget increase of $23 million last October. Why did the original program director resign in protest? And why do official labor statistics show only 700 new jobs created, rather than the 5,000 you've been reporting to the public? The question, longer than one sentence but still direct and devastating, hung in the air. Crockett's smile disappeared completely. Wilson, standing beside her, visibly paled. Reporters who had been only half paying attention suddenly looked up from their phones, sensing a story. For several seconds, Crockett stood frozen at the podium. Her eyes darted to her staff standing at the side of the room, but they looked equally shocked. They hadn't prepared for this specific question because they thought no one had access to those numbers. Well, Crockett stammered. Those figures don't accurately represent the full scope of the program's impact. Which figures are inaccurate? Karoline pressed, knowing she had the advantage now. The budget overrun, the director's resignation letter which cited ethical concerns about misrepresented data, or the Bureau of Labor Statistics report from last month? The room erupted with follow-up questions from other reporters. Cameras flashed. Crockett's press secretary rushed to the podium and announced they would take a short break before continuing. As Crockett was ushered out a side door, her face showed a mixture of anger and fear. She knew what had just happened. Her carefully constructed narrative had been shattered in less than a minute with one well-researched question. Karoline stepped back against the wall as reporters crowded around her, asking how she obtained her information. She simply said, "All the documents I referenced are public records. Anyone could have found them." Her phone buzzed with a message from Senator Powell. "Perfect execution. Come back to the office immediately. This is about to explode." As Karoline left the hotel, she passed a TV in the lobby already showing clips of the exchange. The caption read, "Crockett's economic plan questioned. Jobs numbers don't add up." Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. Karoline took a deep breath of the fresh air. In Washington, careers could be made or broken in a single day, sometimes with a single question. Today, she had delivered such a question, and Jasmine, Crockett's rising star, had just begun its rapid fall back to earth. The real storm was just beginning. Karoline Leavitt terminates Jasmine Crockett's career in one sentence. Part 3. The hours after the press conference were a blur of activity. Karoline returned to Senator Powell's office to find the entire staff gathered around television screens, showing news coverage of what had just happened. When she walked in, several people broke into applause. "There she is," Senator Powell said with a broad smile. "The woman of the hour." Karoline tried to remain professional despite the rush of excitement she felt. "Thank you, Senator, but I was just doing my job." The facts spoke for themselves. "Don't be modest," Powell replied. "You found those facts when no one else bothered to look. And you delivered the question perfectly." Lisa rushed over with a tablet showing social media reactions. "It's everywhere." Karoline, Crockett numbers is trending. People are asking how she got away with misrepresenting the data for so long." Mike Davis, who had been skeptical earlier, now looked impressed. Crockett's office just announced they're canceling her appearances for the rest of the day. They claim it's due to a scheduling conflict, but everyone knows that's not true. Karoline's phone had been buzzing non-stop with messages from reporters wanting comments. She ignored most of them, but she did take a call from Sam Peterson. "You delivered that question like a surgeon with a scalpel," Sam said. "Clean, precise, and deadly." "What happened after I left?" Karoline asked. "Chaos. They tried to restart the press conference, but every question was about the budget overrun and the job numbers. Wilson looked like he wanted to disappear. After 10 minutes, they shut it down completely." Karoline thanked him and ended the call. Senator Powell motioned for her to join him in his private office. "We need to be strategic about next steps," Powell said once they were alone. "Crockett will try to recover from this. She'll come up with explanations, excuses. We need to be ready." Karoline nodded. "I've already asked Lisa to monitor all statements from Crockett's office, and I have more documents ready if they try to deny anything." "Good. But there's something else we need to discuss." Powell leaned forward. The party leadership called. They're impressed with how you handled this. There's talk of offering you a more senior position. Karoline was surprised. What kind of position? Communications director for the National Committee. It would be a big step up. Karoline felt a mix of pride and uncertainty. Such a promotion would mean more responsibility, more visibility. I appreciate the offer, Senator. Can I think about it? Of course, take a few days, but know that I've always seen great potential in you, Karoline. This is just the beginning. When Karoline left Powell's office, she found Lisa waiting for her. Crockett's office just released a statement, Lisa said, handing Karoline a printout. They're claiming the numbers were misunderstood and taken out of context. Karoline read the statement and shook her head. This is weak. They're not even addressing the specific points I raised. What do we do now? Lisa asked. We wait. Let this sink in with the public. By tomorrow, journalists will start digging into the numbers themselves. Once that happens, Crockett won't be able to hide behind vague statements. That evening, Karoline declined invitations to celebrate with colleagues. Instead, she went home to her quiet apartment, made a simple dinner, and watched the news coverage of the day's events. Almost every channel showed the clip of her question and Crockett's stumbling response. Political analysts were already discussing the impact. On one show, a former congressman said, "What makes this so devastating is that Leavitt didn't attack Crockett personally. She simply asked about specific facts that are verifiable. It's the worst kind of question for a politician, one that can't be dismissed as a partisan attack." Karoline's phone rang. It was her mother calling from New Hampshire. "I saw you on the news, honey," her mother said proudly. "You looked so professional." Karoline smiled. Her parents had always supported her career in politics, even when it meant she rarely got to visit home. "Thanks, Mom. It was an important day. Are you okay? You sound tired. Just processing everything. It happened so fast? Well, get some rest. And remember what your father always says. Stay humble in victory." After talking with her mother, Karoline checked her email one last time before bed. There was a message from an unknown sender that caught her attention. The subject line read, "What you don't know about Crockett." Curious, she opened it. The message was brief. There's more to the story. The program failure goes deeper than just budget and jobs. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m., Lincoln Memorial. The email was signed only "A Concerned Citizen." Karoline stared at the message, wondering if it was legitimate or just someone trying to get attention after today's news. She decided she would think about it overnight. The next morning, Karoline woke up to even more news about Crockett. Overnight, several reporters had obtained copies of the same documents Karoline had used, and they were publishing their own stories about the failed district program. The narrative was shifting quickly from Crockett's ambitious economic plan to questions about Crockett's credibility. Karoline dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, then caught a taxi to the Lincoln Memorial. She wasn't sure if she would meet with the mysterious emailer, but she wanted to see who showed up. She arrived early and sat on the steps of the memorial, watching tourists take photos. At exactly 10 a.m., a middle-aged woman in a gray coat approached her. "Ms. Leavitt, I'm Jane Evans. I sent you the email." Karoline studied the woman carefully. "How did you get my email address?" "I used to work for Congresswoman Crockett," Jane explained. "In the district office. I was part of the economic program team until I quit 6 months ago." Now Karoline was interested. "Why did you quit?" Jane looked around nervously. "Can we walk? I don't want to stay in one place too long." They began walking along the reflecting pool. Jane spoke quietly. "I was the budget analyst for the program. I was the one who first noticed the discrepancies. When I brought them to my supervisor, I was told to adjust the numbers to make the program look successful." "You were asked to falsify reports?" Karoline asked. Jane nodded. "At first it was small things, counting part-time temporary jobs as full-time permanent positions. Then it got worse. By the time I left, they were claiming job creation numbers that were 7 times the actual figure." "Do you have proof?" Karoline asked. This could be exactly what she needed to counter any comeback attempt from Crockett. I kept copies of the original reports alongside the altered versions that were submitted officially. I also have emails directing staff to change the numbers. Karoline tried to contain her excitement. Why are you coming forward now? Jane looked out over the water. When I saw you ask that question yesterday, I realized someone finally had the courage to speak the truth. I've been carrying this burden for months. I want to do the right thing. These documents could be very important, Karoline said. Would you be willing to share them with me and possibly speak to reporters if necessary? Yes, but I'm scared. Crockett has powerful friends. My career could be over. Karoline understood the woman's fear. Whistleblowers often paid a high price for their honesty. I know people who can help protect you. Your story matters, Jane. As they continued walking, Jane shared more details about how the program had been mismanaged from the start. Money had been directed to contractors with connections to Crockett's campaign donors. Performance metrics had been changed whenever the program failed to meet targets. Karoline listened carefully, taking mental notes. What had started as one question at a press conference was now unraveling into something much bigger. This wasn't just about inflated numbers or a failed program anymore. There were serious ethical concerns, possibly even legal ones. By the time they parted ways, Jane had agreed to send Karoline the documents securely. Karoline promised to keep Jane's identity protected as long as possible. As Karoline headed back to the office, she knew that the story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. And Jasmine Crockett's troubles were about to get much worse. Karoline Leavitt Terminates Jasmine Crockett's career in one sentence. Part 4. 3 days after meeting Jane Evans, Karoline sat in Senator Powell's office with a thick folder of documents on her lap. The room was silent as Powell and Mike Davis reviewed copies of what Jane had provided. This is worse than we thought, Powell said finally, putting down a page of email printouts. They weren't just exaggerating numbers, they were directing funds to companies owned by donors. Mike nodded grimly. And changing official reports to hide it. This could be criminal. Karoline had spent 2 sleepless nights going through everything Jane had given her. The evidence was clear and damning. The question is, what do we do with this information? Jane is scared. She doesn't want her name made public yet. Powell leaned back in his chair. We need to be careful here. This isn't just politics anymore. We're talking about possible fraud involving public funds. Should we take it to the ethics committee? Karoline asked. Not yet, Powell decided. First, we need legal advice to make sure we handle this properly, and we need to protect your source. Mike suggested. What about giving the documents to a trusted reporter? Someone who will investigate thoroughly but also protect the whistleblower. Karoline thought about it. Beth Adams at the Washington Post. She's known for her careful reporting on government spending, and she respects source confidentiality. Powell agreed. Set up a meeting with her, off the record at first, see if she's interested. Later that day, Karoline met Beth Adams at a quiet cafe far from Capitol Hill. Beth was in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and reading glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. She had been covering politics for 25 years and had a reputation for fairness and accuracy. Thanks for meeting me, Karoline said as they sat in a corner booth. Your call sounded interesting, Beth replied. You said you have information about Congresswoman Crockett's district program? Karoline nodded. What I'm about to show you goes beyond what I revealed at the press conference. This information comes from a whistleblower who worked directly on the program. Beth's eyes sharpened with interest. I'm listening. Karoline slid a manila envelope across the table. It contained copies of some of Jane's documents, with identifying information removed. This is just a sample. There's much more. Beth spent several minutes reviewing the papers, her expression growing more serious with each page. If these documents are authentic, this is a major story. Not just political embarrassment for Crockett, but potential misuse of public funds. They're authentic, Karoline assured her. The whistleblower is willing to speak with you directly, but only with guarantees of anonymity for now. Beth looked up from the documents. Why are you bringing this to me, Karoline? You work for Senator Powell. This could be seen as a political attack. It's not about politics anymore, Karoline said honestly. This is about holding public officials accountable, regardless of party. The whistleblower came to me because of what happened at the press conference. I'm just making sure the information gets to someone who will handle it responsibly. Beth studied Karoline's face, then nodded slowly. I'll need to verify everything independently, and I'll need to speak with your source. I understand. I'll arrange it. 2 days later, Beth met with Jane Evans at a hotel room Karoline had booked under a false name. Karoline was present for the meeting, which lasted 4 hours as Jane walked Beth through every document and answered detailed questions. Afterward, Beth told Karoline, I'm convinced. My editor will want additional verification, but there's enough here to start a serious investigation. It will take at least a week before we publish anything. Take the time you need, Karoline said. Getting it right is more important than getting it fast. Over the next week, Crockett tried to recover from the initial press conference disaster. She appeared on friendly news shows explaining that her program had faced typical startup challenges, but was fundamentally sound. She accused Senator Powell's office of playing politics with selective data. Karoline monitored these appearances but made no public comments. She knew what was coming. 8 days after meeting with Beth, Karoline was called into Senator Powell's office early in the morning. The Post is publishing today, Powell said, showing her an advance copy of the article that Beth's editor had shared with him as a courtesy. The headline read, Documents Reveal Systematic Fraud in Crockett District Program. Karoline scanned the article. It was thorough, detailed, and devastating. Beth had found additional sources who confirmed Jane's account and had uncovered even more connections between program funds and Crockett's donors. This goes beyond our initial findings, Karoline noted. Beth found 3 companies that received contracts despite not meeting the basic qualifications. Powell nodded. And all 3 are owned by people who donated to Crockett's campaign. This isn't going away. By noon, the story was everywhere. Other news outlets scrambled to catch up with the Post's reporting. Crockett's office released a statement, calling the allegations baseless and promising a full response later. That response never came. Instead, by mid-afternoon, news broke that the House Ethics Committee was launching an investigation. Shortly after that, the Justice Department announced it was reviewing the matter for possible criminal violations. Karoline watched it all unfold from her office, feeling a mix of satisfaction and sadness. She believed in accountability, but she took no joy in seeing someone's career implode so completely. Lisa came in with updates throughout the day. Crockett just canceled all her public appearances for the week, she reported. And 3 of her staff members have resigned, including Paul Wilson. Later, she added, the party leadership is distancing themselves from her. The House Speaker just said on live TV that if these allegations are true, they represent a serious breach of public trust. By evening, political analysts were openly discussing whether Crockett could survive the scandal. The consensus was growing that she could not. Karoline left the office late, declining again to join colleagues for drinks to celebrate. As she walked to her car, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? She answered cautiously. Ms. Leavitt? This is Congressman Alan Harper. Harper was a senior member of Crockett's party and chair of an important committee. Karoline was surprised. Yes, Congressman. What can I do for you? I wanted to speak with you directly, Harper said, his voice tired. What's happening with Jasmine, Crockett? It's a mess, but I want you to know that some of us appreciate how you've handled this. You could have turned this into a circus, but you've been professional. You let the facts speak for themselves. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. There's something else, Harper continued. When the dust settles from this, we're going to need good people who understand the importance of integrity in government. People like you, regardless of party affiliation. Keep that in mind for the future. After they hung up, Karoline stood in the parking garage, thinking about Harper's words. In Washington, careers ended and began in strange ways. One door closes, another opens. Politics was a tough business, but maybe, just maybe, there was still room for truth and accountability. Her phone buzzed with a text from Senator Powell. White House called. They're watching how this plays out. Your name came up. We should talk. Tomorrow. Karoline put her phone away and drove home through the quiet streets of nighttime Washington. One question at a press conference had started all this. One carefully researched, precisely delivered question had changed everything. Not just for Jasmine Crockett, but perhaps for Karoline too. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. For now, she was content knowing that in a city where truth was often the first casualty of politics, sometimes it found a way to prevail after all. Karoline Leavitt Terminates Jasmine Crockett's career in one sentence. Part 5. 6 weeks had passed since the Washington Post broke the story about Jasmine Crockett's district program. The political landscape had shifted dramatically in that time. Karoline stood by the window in her new office, looking out at the Washington Monument in the distance. The view still surprised her sometimes. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Lisa entered carrying a stack of newspapers. Today's headlines, Lisa said, placing them on the desk. They're all about Crockett's announcement. Karoline picked up the top paper. The headline read, Crockett will not seek re-election amid ongoing investigations. It was inevitable, Karoline said quietly. The past 6 weeks had seen a steady stream of revelations about Crockett's program. 3 separate investigations were underway, one by the House Ethics Committee, one by the Justice Department, and one by the Inspector General for the department that had funded the program. Jane Evans, the whistleblower, had finally agreed to be interviewed on camera, though with her face in shadow and her voice altered. Her testimony had been powerful and convincing. Other former employees had come forward as well, each adding new details to the story of mismanagement and deception. Through it all, Karoline had maintained a professional distance. She had declined numerous requests for interviews and had instructed her staff not to comment publicly. She wanted the focus to remain on the facts, not on her role in exposing them. Senator Powell is on his way up, Lisa said, checking her phone. He wants to discuss the White House meeting tomorrow. Karoline nodded. Make sure we have the latest polling numbers ready. Since the scandal broke, Karoline's career had taken an unexpected turn. 3 weeks ago, she had accepted a new position as senior communications advisor to the president. The offer had come after her handling of the Crockett situation had impressed senior White House staff. Senator Powell had been supportive of the move, even though it meant losing her from his team. You've outgrown us, he had told her with a mix of pride and sadness. The president needs someone with your talents and integrity. Now Powell served as an informal advisor to Karoline as she adjusted to her new role. The responsibilities were greater, the stakes higher, but the core of the job remained the same, ensuring that truth and facts guided communication strategy. The door opened again, and Senator Powell walked in. At 62, he moved with the energy of a much younger man. Quite a day, he said, gesturing to the newspapers. Have you heard from Crockett directly? Karoline shook her head. No, and I don't expect to. Her statement didn't mention me or the press conference. She's blaming partisan attacks for her decision not to run again. Powell sat down across from her desk. Classic deflection. But it doesn't matter now. The investigations will continue regardless of her political future. What matters is that the system worked, Karoline said. Slowly, imperfectly, but it worked. The truth came out. Thanks to you, Powell reminded her. Don't forget that none of this would have happened if you hadn't asked that question at the press conference. Karoline smiled slightly. One question. It's hard to believe sometimes. That's how it often works, Powell said. One person asking the right question at the right time can change everything. They spent the next hour preparing for Karoline's meeting with the president the following day. The administration was launching a major initiative on government transparency and accountability, and Karoline would play a key role in shaping the message. After Powell left, Karoline received a call from Beth Adams at the Washington Post. Have you seen Crockett's statement? Beth asked. Yes. Not surprising, but still significant. My sources tell me there's more coming, Beth said. The Justice Department investigation has expanded to include 3 other members of Congress who used the same model for programs in their districts. Karoline was surprised. This is bigger than just Crockett? Much bigger. Remember when you told me this wasn't about politics? You were right. This is about a systematic problem with how these district programs are run. Crockett is just the tip of the iceberg. After the call, Karoline sat quietly, processing this new information. What had started as one question at a press conference was now exposing broader issues in how government programs were managed. The impact was extending far beyond one congresswoman's career. Later that afternoon, Karoline received an unexpected visitor. Jane Evans was shown into her office, looking much more confident than when they had first met at the Lincoln Memorial. "I wanted to thank you in person," Jane said as they sat down. "Without you asking that question, none of this would have happened. I might never have found the courage to come forward." "You're the one who took the real risk," Karoline replied. "Whistleblowers face serious consequences. How are you doing?" Jane smiled. "Better than I expected. I've received job offers from organizations that value ethics in government, and I sleep better at night knowing I did the right thing." "I'm glad to hear that," Karoline said sincerely. "What about you?" Jane asked. "This new White House position is a big step up." Karoline nodded. "It is, but the principles remain the same. Facts matter, truth matters. That doesn't change no matter where you work." After Jane left, Karoline had one more meeting scheduled. She walked to a nearby restaurant to meet Sam Peterson, the reporter who had called on her at Crockett's press conference. Sam was already seated at a corner table when she arrived. "The woman of the hour," he greeted her with a smile. "Hardly," Karoline replied, sitting down. "Old news now." "Not so old. Crockett's announcement today has everyone talking about how it all started, with your question." They ordered drinks, and Sam asked, "So what's next for you? The White House is a big platform." Karoline considered the question. "I want to use this position to promote more transparency in government. Beth Adams told me the Justice Department investigation is expanding to other members of Congress." Sam nodded. "I've heard the same. This could be the beginning of a major cleanup in how district programs are managed." "That would be a good outcome," Karoline said. "Better than just ending one person's career." "Speaking of careers," Sam said, "there's talk that you might have a political future of your own." "Some people are suggesting you should run for office someday." Karoline smiled but didn't answer directly. Politics was unpredictable. 6 weeks ago, she had been a press secretary for a senator. Now she worked at the White House. Who knew what might happen in the future? Later that evening, Karoline returned to her apartment and found a small package waiting outside her door. Inside was a framed newspaper clipping of the first article about the press conference, with a note that read, "One question can change everything. GP, Senator Powell's initials." She placed the frame on her desk next to a photo of her parents. Tomorrow would bring new challenges at the White House. The president's transparency initiative would face resistance from those who preferred the old ways of doing business. There would be more battles ahead. But tonight, Karoline felt a quiet satisfaction. In a city known for spin and deception, she had stood up for facts and truth. One carefully researched question had not only ended Jasmine Crockett's career, but had started a larger conversation about accountability in government. As she prepared for bed, Karoline remembered something her father had told her when she first moved to Washington. In a room full of people shouting, sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that simply asks the right question. How right he had been. One question, delivered at the right moment, could indeed change everything. And sometimes that was enough to make a difference.